Is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein a warning or a homage to modern scientists? Hello, I'm Paige Jimmerfield. I'm presenting my Summative Assessment Task 2.1, in which I will be discussing whether Frankenstein is a warning or a homage to modern scientists. I'm personally very interested in science, so it's a really interesting topic for me to be discussing. I would like to open saying that once an author releases their work to the public, it is out of their control how it is interpreted. At the time when Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was released, a lot of people thought it was glorifying modern science, and there's no denying that it really shows the beauty behind science. However, Frankenstein is a horror story, and it could be interpreted that Mary Shelley used fear to warn scientists against recklessness. Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein shows how attractive and alluring science can be, which could be the reason why it was thought to be an homage to modern scientists. However, it also warns scientists of the dangers that accompany it when it quickly becomes corrupt. Mary Shelley teaches us that scientific endeavors can take a turn for the worse when ethics aren't considered. The novel also warns us about what the consequences of what happens when obsession takes the place of enthusiasm and motivation. Argument 1. Frankenstein teaches us that scientists must be regulated to ensure that the experiments they are conducting are morally correct. Frankenstein is proof of what happens when experiments are unregulated and unethical. Victor wants to conduct his experiments for his own gain and glory. His intentions in his pursuit of knowledge are not pure, and so we're about to get into that. This is shown when Victor says, "A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs." Shelley, 38-39. Now for an explanation of the quote. This quote shows us that Frankenstein wasn't making scientific advancements for a good cause. He only did this because he was selfish and he wanted the glory that came with it. With his interest in animating a corpse, he could have easily looked into bringing back dead loved ones, but he wanted his creature to be indebted to him for its existence. And so in this, we see that he was selfish, and it was unethical of him to create a being when he only wanted it for his personal gain and not to make things better. And our next quote is from Frankenstein's monster himself. "Shall each man," cried he, "find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone?" Shelley, 146. Frankenstein's monster is emotionally complex and neglected, and it was not ethical of Frankenstein to create a being without proper accommodations for it to live. The entire situation was ill-planned and violates the monster's basic moral rights. And so really it was very, what I'm trying to point out here is that it was very unethical of Frankenstein to create his monster in this way when he really had no intention of caring for it, and he wasn't prepared for what could happen when things went wrong. Cloning humans can pose a lot of ethical dilemmas, such as the psychological distress the cloned humans could have, raising questions about the human right to an exclusive identity, as well as the potential for selective elimination of certain traits. Brenner. So that was a paraphrase from one of the articles I've researched, and the dilemma presented with cloning humans are things that Frankenstein should have considered before making his creation. The creation of the monster was reckless, and because of his ego, Victor didn't think of what could have gone wrong. He causes his monster and himself a great deal of psychological distress and refuses his creation the most basic human rights. And so had Frankenstein had some kind of governing board to deal with and considered ethics more heavily, he would have had to think through, because he's creating a monster that is emotionally aware, he would have had to think about that. Argument 2. Scientists should be aware of the slippery slope between motivation or enthusiasm and obsession. Victor Frankenstein shows how obsession with a project can cloud one's judgment. His tunnel vision took many tolls on him, which made him unfit to create life. We'll get into that now. So in this first quote, "My cheek has grown pale with study, and my person has become emaciated with confinement." Shelley, 39. So in this quote, it shows us that Victor is so obsessed with the completion of his project that physical exertion is taking a toll on him. And because he's so obsessed and he is becoming physically drained, he is unable to make complete and rational decisions about creating life. Now for our next quote. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation, but now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Shelley, 42. In this quote, Victor even admits to himself that his ambitions are no longer moderate, and so he's talking about the creation of his monster, and he realizes that he's going down the wrong path. Because he's so obsessed with the idea of creating life, he's living in an illusion, and when he sees his creature come to life, that dream is shattered, and he runs away. And because he was so obsessed, he didn't have time to consider what would have happened if things went wrong. Moving on. Now, this is a quote from an article about scientific regulation. Part of the problem and consequent need for regulations is that researchers have conflicts of interest and often do not recognize ethical challenges their research may pose. Klitzman. And now for a quick explanation. So this quote is especially pertinent to the novel because it does a very good job of describing Frankenstein's journey. His creation of the monster was unethical in many ways, but because his judgment was clouded with obsession, he didn't see that. And so that was Frankenstein's conflict of interest. And so that's all. In conclusion, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a warning to modern scientists that teaches us about the need for ethical regulations and the danger that can accompany obsession. That's all. Thank you for listening today.